You can't improve what you can't measure. But let me ask you this. Are you measuring the right things? As AI enters the software development lifecycle, our old definition of productivity starts to crack. Velocity isn't enough. Lines of code don't tell the full story. And gut feelings, they don't scale. Today, we are going beyond the basics, beyond output, to understand how AI is changing not just what developers do, but how they feel doing it. This session is about putting experience back at the center of engineering metrics. I'm Adib Valiullah, Director of Engineering Excellence at Harness, and I'll be moderating today's session. Joining me are two fantastic voices in this space. Nathan Harvey, DORA lead at Google Cloud, and Sanjeev Hasaiza, Global Director of Software Development and Architecture at Sensomatic. Let's start by reframing the basics. As AI begins to assist or even automate productivity, what does developer productivity really mean anymore? Question to you. Does the definition of developer productivity evolve with AI, or does it stay the same?
I think it's a good question, and I think the answer is yes. It evolves and it stays the same. There's a little bit of both that's going on here. You know, AI is fundamentally changing how developers are working. And the developers that I'm seeing out there that are embracing it are, frankly, they're experiencing a little bit more joy in the work that they're doing. It's really unlocking a lot of creativity for developers and allowing them to move forward very quickly. So I really think that's important. But as we look across the entire software development lifecycle, and specifically around software delivery, we still consider, or we still see a lot of friction in that process. And so I think the question really becomes, how do we move AI from beyond just in the developer's environment, but throughout the entire delivery lifecycle? And so in that case, I think that the metrics kind of stay the same. We really need to understand how frequently are we delivering value, at what cadence, and at what stability are we able to do that?
Fantastic.
So I would like to, I agree with what Nathan mentioned. I would like to add to that, AI productivity is not anymore just about speed. It's about how qualitative metrics you can learn from AI and how it can help developers to improve their productivity. And this can be done with a lot of frameworks. That's a very important piece. You have to have a proper framework to implement AI.
So are organizations conflating Gen AI adoption as a proxy for productivity?
Yes, Gen AI is being treated as a proxy for productivity by many organizations, but that's not the right way to implement Gen AI. This needs to be done right. When you're implementing Gen AI, you need to have a clear framework when you implement. It's being treated as adoption of AI. It does not mean it's going to create impact. So you need to have proper Gen AI use cases defined, how it's going to help your organization, how it's going to impact the productivity. And then the next one, I would say the lack of clear metrics. If you don't have clear metrics predefined, just by implementing Gen AI is not going to help with the productivity. And there's another aspect to is hype-driven process. A lot of organizations these days, there's a lot of buzzword out there, Gen AI implementation. They just implement Gen AI. That does not mean Gen AI is going to help your organization to increase productivity. And the last point I would like to make is superficial use cases. A lot of organizations, they do not focus on the correct use case you want to implement for your organization, how it's going to implement your organization. Just by having quantitative use cases is not going to help your organization.
Yeah, I really agree with you there, Sanjeev. And I think that too many organizations are starting to, as you said, conflate these two measures. Oh, we're seeing high AI adoption. That's basically measuring the same thing as productivity. It's not. It's not. And in fact, I worry for any organization that wants to use AI to improve productivity, yet doesn't have good, clear measures of how they're measuring productivity today. And this is a challenge that I run into a lot. People say, we're going to implement AI to help us improve productivity. I ask, well, how are you measuring productivity today? And they don't have a good answer. Right. And so then they start looking at lines of code accepted and how many people are actually using AI. And these are good measures of AI adoption. But AI adoption is not the same thing necessarily as productivity. In fact, AI adoption might be a leading indicator for productivity, but it's really important to have that broad view of the system to understand what's coming.
So if AI is changing the definition of productivity, Nathan, how should we adjust our thinking around developer experience metrics?
Yeah. Well, I think that developer experience has always been very important. And in our DORA research, one of the things that we are seeing is that as AI adoption increases, developer experience is actually getting better. Things like time spent in flow, the job satisfaction that developers are reporting, how happy they are with their jobs, and their level of productivity. These are all increasing. These are really good, I think, early signals for us. But I think as we continue to think about how we're going to measure developer productivity, it's more than just the productivity of the developer. We have to really look at the whole system, right? And this is where I think as you get AI adoption,
right,
you start to see some of those immediate developer impacts that are happening. But then we need to think beyond just those developers and think about how does that software make it all the way through to production. So now we start talking about things like documentation quality, feedback cycles. Are we improving those? And eventually, of course, what we want is this developer productivity gains to turn into ROI gains for our business. And so we have to have a view of what are those business metrics that actually matter, and how do technologists help us get closer to those business goals?
Fantastic. Yeah, so AI is here to help, but it can also disrupt. So let's talk about balance. How do we keep a human-centered approach to thinking about developer experience in this AI-infused work?
Well, I think the question or the answer itself is in the question. We're talking about developer experience. We can't go to an AI and say, hey, how's the experience of my developers today? The only person or the only group of people that can answer that question are the developers themselves. And so I think this is another really important component for organizations to consider. We don't measure productivity and experience through logs and telemetry alone. It's not just through quantitative data.
Right.
In fact, if you want to understand the developer experience, you cannot do so without talking to some developers. You need that qualitative feedback as well. And I think that's really important. And just like we care about what are the business metrics, we also need to understand what is the experience that a developer likes to have. And I know that every developer who runs into a lot of friction and red tape and bureaucracy and walls and constraints, those are not the developers that are happy. And so we as organizations need to find where is the friction point for developers and how do we alleviate some of that friction so that they can have a better experience. And as we make them more productive, they'll become happier developers. There's always that debate, are happy developers productive? Or are productive developers happy? Again, I think these two things sort of feed each other. And so as we reduce friction, we're increasing productivity, which is increasing happiness, which then sort of feeds back on this virtuous cycle.
Right. And I want to touch on what Sanjeev talked about earlier, right? Connecting all of this to business objectives, right? So you mentioned, developer experience is important, but are they connected to your business objectives or goals, right? So Sanjeev, have you seen morale or cultural changes in your team as AI tools were introduced?
Yes. So when we have gone through this AI journey, and when we implemented that, few things we made sure we are introducing AI to help developers as well as the organization, how it can help the developers to increase their productivity. As Nathan mentioned, you need to know what's your productivity, what productivity you want to increase for your organization. It can be developer happiness. It can be get to the market faster or innovate faster. So you need to know your metrics very clear, and you want to make sure developers are part of this journey. If you leave developers outside of this journey, and just try to impose, this is what we want to implement, you will see that friction we were talking about. And we have seen during this journey, few things we made sure. AI is there to help with productivity. It should not stop the creativity. It should not add that friction. And when we had that, the goal clear, we had our organization, engineers, we created a small group who was focused on the POCs of those use cases we came up with. And there was a participation from each team. Everybody helped with their own use cases and came back with the recommendation. They felt they're part of this whole process. And any data highlighted from that output was used as opportunity for dialogue, not to challenge the developers.
You bring a very important point about purpose-driven development, right? When you create purpose in your organization, the impact that purpose brings back the morale to the team, right? So it's tying purpose to your impact, right? So let's move from philosophy to practice, right? How do we measure the real impact AI is having on our teams? So Sanjeev, how should we measure the ROI of AI from a developer experience lens?
See, ROI. With AI, ROI is multi-dimensional. The most important piece to measure the ROI of AI is the integration of tools in your framework. Without integration of tool to measure AI, it's a cost sunk. So it's very important you have data-driven frameworks implemented, how you're going to measure the key KPIs and how this KPI is going to help to move the needle. So that's very important in this.
Yeah, and I think, going back to some of the things that I said earlier, it is important to grab that qualitative information as well. I think with anything that we're going to measure, it is important that we first have a baseline for how are we doing today before we change anything.
Right.
And in the perfect world, what we would do is get that baseline and then introduce one small change and then see what are the ripple impacts of that. But of course, none of us live in a perfect world. We all work in very complex organizations where things are changing all of the time, which actually makes it even more important to have those baseline measures in place and really understand how are developers feeling today, what measurements are we using, and then let's inject a new tool or a new process or a new way of working and see what are the ramifications of that. And I really like, Sanjeev, what you described with what you're doing with your teams. You're really including them in that process. Because let's be honest, I think that there are certainly developers out there that, and it's not just developers as well, it's every profession that's out there that's worried that AI is coming for their job, right? And we need to make sure that, look, no, this isn't a tool that's coming to replace you. This is a tool that's coming to amplify the impact that you are having. And so let's sit down as an organization and design that together. And as we learn, another word I'm going to borrow from you there, Sanjeev, we sit down and we have conversations. We take those lessons that we've learned and we're reapplying them, amplifying the good lessons, and maybe shining a spotlight on those pitfalls that we want to make sure teams avoid.
Yeah. So to conclude what Nathan said, during this journey, the morale of developers, that was our main focus. That we're not introducing AI to bring as a threat to take away their job. It is to make their life easy, to do the boring job developers don't like.
Yes.
And in the beginning of the journey, there were a lot of questions asked, which is natural. We all know AI comes as, hey, it's going to take away my job. And how we concluded that POC process as success, because at the end of the POC, developer came to us and said, when are we going to start using this?
Yes.
So that was, to us, it was a
That's
success.
a great signal.
Yeah.
So were there any metrics that surprised you in this developer experience journey post your AI adoption?
Yeah, so interestingly, in the DORA research, one of the things that we found, I said earlier, job satisfaction, productivity, these were all improving. Documentation quality, code is improving, code complexity is going down, which is a good thing. Of course, we want code complexity to go down. But interestingly, what we also saw was that software delivery performance, as measured by both throughput and stability, seems to be falling off as we adopt more AI. And this is somewhat surprising because we've seen these other sort of leading indicators like documentation quality, job satisfaction, and so forth. These typically predict better software delivery performance. But in our DORA research, that's not what we saw. We saw that software delivery performance falling off. And I think that this can be explained a number of different ways. Most of the explanations, honestly, though, are hypotheses. Our data can't tell us exactly why. But some of those explanations include, look, this is a new tool or process. Anytime we bring in something new, you should expect some dips in productivity that are eventually, and hopefully not for too long, but are going to turn around. And you're going to see a real improvement based on the adoption of those new tools. I think there may be other lessons there that we've forgotten from our past as AI has come along. One of the ways that DORA has shown that the best way to improve software delivery performance is to ship in small batches, right? Small batches and minimize your work in process. Well, now AI has come along, and in the time it took me to write a small change, I can write a much bigger change. And if I'm pushing a bigger change through a system that is optimized for smaller changes, we kind of get what we expect. Software delivery performance falls off. So I think, honestly, it's a very interesting time for us as researchers. We're very excited because we're here at the beginning of this AI adoption, and we're going to be able to watch it over the years and hopefully provide good signals for teams and organizations looking to adopt. We're learning together with them on what are the best paths forward.
So let's talk about engagement. AI changes workflows. But how do we know if it's helping or hurting? So Nathan, what signals, quantitative or qualitative, help you identify whether developers are truly engaged or not?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to engagement, there's kind of two aspects to that. There is, of course, just the sheer number of engagements, right? So how frequently is a developer using AI? How often are they asking for input? How often are they accepting suggestions? All of these give us sort of a surface level, if you will, of engagement. Certainly, we could go out and buy a license for every developer, but if we only see 2 or 3 licenses being utilized, that's a good signal. It's not a good outcome, but a good signal of something needs to be changed here, right? So we want to first see that they're utilizing the tools, then that they're getting quantitative value out of them. And that might look like something like your code acceptances. What is your code acceptance rate? As that increases, you get a good signal that the AI is giving me good results. And if it's not good, there's a couple of different ways that you could potentially improve that. It might be that the LLM needs, a bolster, but it might also be the way that your developers are interacting with that LLM through prompts and through code suggestions and so forth. Maybe we can learn from each other. And you might even see signals of groups that are doing really well, maybe even individuals that are getting a lot of value and a lot of code completions and those that aren't. And I think this is a good signal as an organization. Hey, let's make sure that we're amplifying those successes across the organization so that we can learn from each other.
Right.
So those are some of the quantitative things. From a qualitative perspective, I think it really comes back to those developer experience questions that we have. Are you satisfied in the work that you're doing? Are you able to innovate, as Sanjeev was saying? Are you feeling productive in the work that you do? Where are the friction points? And let's make sure that we're at least reducing those friction points, maybe the amount of friction or the number of points that cause you friction.
Mm-hmm. PR cycle time, pull request cycle time is one indicator that should reduce a little bit. Your reviews should be much more efficient, right? If you have an assistant working with you, right? And then you mentioned code change size, right? You want to have easier, smaller, maintainable code changes, so it's easier for your development teams to understand. So some of these are some of my learnings I have seen while working with our customers. So what are some new ways we can measure creativity, learning, or flow in an AI augmented world?
Yeah, so anything you use to implement in your organization for AI, if you cannot measure it, it's a wrong metrics to begin with. So there are so many tools out there, so many options. Implementing the tool is not going to give you, by default, you can increase the productivity. So it's very important when you're implementing any of the AI productivity tool, you need to have a baseline of okay, this is where we want to improve our organization. If our challenge is today, I want to have more story points to be delivered. You need to have a proper baseline of what we have today and how this tool is going to help us to improve this baseline, and how you're going to measure it. And this is what we have done for different use cases, for whether it's our developer team, or is it our QA team, or it is our database team. Every team has their own challenges they want to improvise, and we have taken the baseline, and after the implementation we have taken another baseline and see how it's improving this.
So it goes back to what Nathan, you said, right? You start with a set of metrics, see the impact, maybe change certain levers, and then rinse and repeat, right?
Yes.
But you want to take smaller steps, defining that objective, and then going forward with the next one.
Yeah, I think it is really important to have sort of that North Star that you're heading towards, and understanding what is it that we're trying to accomplish. And then, as Sanjeev said, we have conversations around, well, what do we need to do as a team in order to make progress towards that goal, right? And this is the process that we fall into. We're going to set a North Star, identify some things we can change, some levers that we can pull, or some knobs that we can adjust in order to get us closer to that North Star. We'll do that for some time, and then we'll pause and reflect. Are we moving closer? Are there other things that we should try? Are we on the right trajectory, or do we need to change course a little bit? Oh, and by the way, is our North Star still our North Star? Right? But always driving these conversations to help us identify the next most important thing that we can change. And frankly, a lot of the importance of that comes from the lessons that we can learn. What can we change to learn if we're getting closer? And let's focus on that.
Right. In my experience, our North Star kind of changed in a few quarters, because we acknowledge that there are certain things we need to improve as an organization. We made the changes, we observed the impact, and in a few quarters, that North Star was actually fulfilled, right? And then we went to a different problem, right? And applied the same process, and we rinsed and repeated this process to achieve efficiency at an organization level. So,
and sometimes you need to have smaller milestones to reach to the North Star.
Absolutely.
And you want to make sure you're reaching those smaller milestones and appreciating the team. That's very important throughout the journey. You need to celebrate your small victories. And
you do need to celebrate small victories, and I'm also a big fan of celebrating failures.
Yeah.
A failure and a success, they're kind of opposite sides of the same coin. We can learn from both of them, and so it's important to do so. And also, when we celebrate failures, we remind the team that this is a safe environment in which you can fail, because that failure does lead to a lesson that we can learn. And it also encourages, of course, taking risks. And we have to take risks in order to innovate. And if we can take a safe risk, that's better than a risky risk, if you will.
Right. I'm going to quote Sundar in this one. In one of his keynotes, he did mention there are instances where you should appreciate the effort and not the outcome, right? Because not every outcome is a successful outcome, but the effort that put into it could lead to so many learnings, right? And that failure could be a stepping stone in much more efficiency gains for your team in the longer run, right? So focus on the effort as well, and not always on the outcome. Which brings me to this next topic of leadership, right? So with better data comes better responsibility, more responsibilities. How does richer developer experience data change the way we lead engineering teams?
I would say it's having this data it should be our tool to not only focus on the organization success, it is to how we can make developers be a part of the team, and how developers feel this is our own journey, and how do we keep that human touch in it. It's not about just improving our numbers all the time, and how it can help my developers, hey, this thing used to take me 2 weeks. By using this AI tool, I can remove that boring work which I don't like. So I can do that in a couple of days, and I can focus on more innovation, how we can do the same solution differently, and how it can help me create more better quality product, and how we can deliver to the market faster, and how from the leadership point, from leadership side, it's very important to keep the team intact and throughout your journey.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's about the alignment of the team. If we're going to give engineers a little bit more capacity because they have a new tool, what are they going to do with that extra capacity? As a leader, I don't want to tell them exactly what to do. I want to make sure that they're aligned towards that North Star that we talked about. They understand, what are we trying to accomplish? They're engineers, they're innovative people. I want to give them that space to be creative and innovative. And I think that as we think also about leaders and having more and more metrics available to us, I think it is always important to remember that every metric comes with a story. And understanding the story behind the metrics is really important. So I think a leader, really in this new world, I think job number one is alignment. Job number two is talking to your engineers, talking to the people that you're leading, and really understanding what's it like on the ground. You know, in the Toyota production system, or in Japanese, they have this phrase, go to the gemba. Go to where the work is happening. Go and observe. Look and see what's actually happening. The data can't tell you that. It can give you some signals, but remember, these signals are just that. They're signals. To get the real ground truth, if you will, you have to go to where the work is.
You know, we have talked a lot on this topic, Nathan. Metrics are conversation starters.
Yes.
Right? You need to apply the business context or just the human context tied to the data you're seeing and have the conversations, right? Data is not here to just make decisions just based on that number, right?
Yeah, I tell my team all the time, don't be afraid of the outcome of the metrics data. And because we're going to use this data to help us, how we can improve ourselves, not to compete with other teams, not to, I don't want to use this data to challenge the team. I want to use the data to have that conversation, how we can improve this. So that's a very important piece, as you said.
Which brings me to a very important question. How do we ensure data deepens empathy and does not erode it?
I think there's a couple of ways that you can do that. The first is remembering who the data is for, right? Every metric has an audience. And if we put the metric in front of the wrong audience, sometimes we can get incorrect behaviors or bad behaviors. You know, if you try to boil the total output or the total impact of a team down to one number and then report that number up, that can be very challenging. But if Sanjeev, as you said, we use these numbers, these metrics, to drive reflection and learning within the team, and really picking what are we going to do next, that can be a very healthy relationship with those metrics. So I think it is really important with every metric that you consider who's the audience for this metric. And sometimes giving more data actually can make it even more challenging to drive improvements. So finding the right balance. How many metrics are enough metrics, and what level of story do we need to go along with those? Who's using these metrics and for what purpose, right? We're using these metrics hopefully as a way to guide our improvement, because we need to be on a continuous improvement journey. I think that's really important.
I think very well said, Nathan. I completely agree with that. This is based on my own experience. I've seen in our organization, you need to be very careful where you publish those metrics. Not every metric is for reporting to everyone in the organization. Certain metrics are just for your own team. Those are just to see where are we doing certain things wrong, and where's the opportunity to improve. And that doesn't mean that metrics needs to be published. People might not understand. And it's very important that we do not erode trust, because there's a fine line there. The wrong metrics can be interpreted in a wrong way. So it's very important what we measure and where should that measurement and metrics go to.
I think I completely agree with what you and Nathan you mentioned. This is all about messaging too, right? A top-down approach to metrics-driven leadership, right? A data-driven leadership is to call out that we are here to improve our efficiency, productivity, alignment as an organization. It is not to measure what Sanjeev or what Nathan or what Adib is doing, but it's as an organization, we see our outputs struggling in certain areas, right? Whether you use AI or you don't use AI, I think focusing on improving that output as an organization, as a team, and using data as a carrot and not as a stick makes a huge difference, right? So starting by the right messaging, letting your teams know that we are here to get from level 1 to level 2 makes a huge difference.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So today's discussion reminded us that metrics matter, but meaning matters more. As we bring AI into our workflows, let's ensure it brings clarity, not confusion. Insights, not just output. And most of all, let's ensure our data deepens our empathy, not replacing it. To those leading teams today, don't just ask what your developers are producing. Ask how they experience their work. That's where real transformation begins. I would like to thank Nathan and Sanjeev for participating today. Your insights were very, very much appreciated, and thank you for sharing this with us today.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.